Let these people talk to each other. You know, these young people want to learn from each other. They will learn from each other. You don't need to get in the way. And then having career-driven curriculum. So I look at these tools, these are training tools, as a new generation of tools that you can use with these new generation of workers and these performance and talent-driven learning challenges. All right, so a lot of new information here, a lot of changes. I don't want to scare you. There really are ways to deal with all this. So I want to give you sort of a little bit of a roadmap. The first is generally what's going on. Now, if you think about training in most corporations, I see it as this is essentially, in the other slides, this is a build. If you think about HR as the sun and training as maybe the earth revolving around the sun, the corporate university was sort of, attached to the sun, right? It was sort of a part of HR, but not really. And so, 10, 15 years ago, companies set up these corporate universities. They were in special locations. People went to them, and they were kind of separate from HR. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, we got very, very excited about e-learning. And really, the training industry spent a lot of time and money focused on implementing LMSs, building e-learning content, understanding how to do content development, buying tools, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had a lot of business value added through these little blue dots, basically doing e-learning, and this is still going on. And that forced the training organization to restructure itself into more of a service organization where you're developing content and you're supporting other people developing content and you're managing the LMS and you're supporting other people managing the LMS. There's a whole bunch of research on this, and we have a whole workshop on this. And that has worked really well, and that's really where most companies are, and they're in the middle of this transition. But now, with talent management, the gravitational pull is getting really strong, and it's pulling training back towards HR again. And that's, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you feel about being aligned with HR, really what's going on. There are some upsides and downsides to being too aligned with HR, as we've seen from our research. But it's clear to me that this is what's going to happen, is that you're going to be more aligned with some of these HR processes. I'm not saying that you're going to necessarily be fully beholden to HR. It depends on your organization. What can you do about this? Well, a couple of highlights here because I'm out of time. The first is you have to align with top management. And let me just show you some data on that. The talent management initiatives that are driven by CEOs or business executives have tremendously higher impact than those that are driven by HR or independent line managers. This is data from the report. I won't go through and explain every little box to you, but what you're seeing here is that when the CEO owns the talent management strategy, it has a tremendous amount more impact than when the VP of HR owns it. Because ultimately, it will be implemented by business managers, not by you. Right? Everything you do will eventually be consumed and used by business managers. Second thing is, identify your top talent challenges. And only you know what those are, and we can help you do that. But that is really the critical step. You need to figure out through your business partners in your organization, your VP of HR, whoever it may be, your line executives, what are the critical talent challenges that are holding your company back from doing the things that you want to do in the business that you're in. And these are typical examples of what they are. The third is you've got to think about this competency thing. I won't go through this in detail right now. We have a report on this if you go to our website. If you go bersin.com/competencies, we have some very interesting research there that's free. You are going to have to think about it. Now, if you're only in one business unit and you're supporting one business function, fine. You have a much easier job. If you're doing leadership development, you have to think about leadership competencies. Don't go buy a competency library and assume it's going to apply to your company. The highest impact companies do not use off-the-shelf competencies. They try to figure out what the unique competencies are in their organization. They might use off-the-shelf competencies to get started, but you try to tweak them to your organization. The third is, or the fourth, is this the third? Yeah, that's the fourth. You may have to reorganize. This sort of siloed organization of HR is changing. Sometimes it looks like this, where there's a VP of talent management that starts to own some of these processes. Usually sourcing and recruiting and compensation is not included in that. That's one model that's beginning to emerge. Sometimes it's the CLO, that if you have a CLO, that takes on some of these new responsibilities, because in many companies the CLO knows more about organizational development than many of the other people in HR, and we've seen that happen as well. So, I think one of the things to be wary of and maybe talk to your management about is, are we organized correctly to solve these kinds of problems? And I think this is going on right now today. Sometimes the VP of Talent Management also owns recruiting, which is a very important process in companies. Recruiting is usually separate, but sometimes I've talked to companies that are bringing that under talent management as well. You need to think about how these processes are going to be governed. All the decisions you make, so let's talk about performance management for a minute, which we're going to talk about next. All the decisions you're going to make about what the performance appraisal form looks like and what the process looks like and when people do what, those are going to have to be borne out and implemented by the managers in your company. If you don't have some of them involved in the design of the process, you could easily develop a process that they don't like or doesn't work for them because of some process that goes on in their business. So what we're finding out is that the companies that are highly effective at this tend to have a bunch of little committees that work together with line of business managers and sometimes line executives sponsoring them to design and implement these processes. We have some case studies we're going to go through this morning. We actually have companies that didn't do this, and they spent several years rolling out performance management, found out it just didn't stick, and they had to go back and do it again because they didn't get enough buy-in from line of business managers. And I'll tell you, AT&T, if the woman at AT&T does what I think she's going to do, she's going to run into this big time when she tries to roll it out amongst 350,000 people. And the final thing is think about a long-term plan. I mean, what Raytheon did is they basically said, here's where we are today. We're going to start, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a pilot of our enterprise-wide performance management process, and we're going to develop some values-based competencies. Then we're going to start rearranging our learning by job role, and we're going to roll out the performance management process, and we're going to develop our leadership competencies. And then in the third year, we're going to build integrated career planning. Okay? It took them 3 years. They see it as a 3-year effort, and I think it is a 3-year effort in a company like Raytheon. And even that is aggressive for a company of that size. But so these are things that will take time, but I think the opportunity is probably to have as much or more business impact than you've probably ever had in your career, because these are very high impact, very powerful programs that can really drive tremendous value. So I hope that was a nice introduction to what talent management is, how it's affecting your organizations and the learning and development function in general. I want to thank you very much for your attention. Are there any? We're a couple of minutes over. Are there any quick questions before we take a break? Okay, how do you convince the CEO to get involved in this? That's actually a good thing to talk about in the workshop, but I think most CEOs know that talent is part of their business, part of their problem, part of their company. I think you have to have an executive. It doesn't have to be the CEO. You need to find some executive that gets it. You don't have to convince everybody. Some senior executive that understands that organizational development is part of your strategy. It may not be the CEO. It may be one of the manufacturing executives. It may be the VP of marketing. It may be somebody else.